do this for archiving purposes. State your full name and spell it for me.
Sister Jane Stoecker, and the last name is spelled Stoecker.
Okay. Oh, what's your official title?
General Superior of the Sisters of St. Joseph of St. Augustine. Now that that's over.
We all know that. It's just in case I get hit by a bus and someone finds this, they go, oh, this is who this person is. Okay. It's taken a long time to get to this point where it's just you and me.
I know it.
So,
Battle of the
but that's okay.
the rich and the famous.
There you go. Boom.
You two are some shit here today, I'm telling you.
Oh, we'll get serious, Jeanette.
Well, we don't have to. We don't
No.
So what I usually do is ask everybody to tell me about what you were like as a child. Were you a troublemaker? Were you a girly girl? Were you a tomboy?
I was so sweet. No, I think I was probably just a sweet little girl. I guess if I had to lean towards, as you mentioned, either the girly girl or tomboy, it would be the tomboy. I don't know if you want me to tell you stories about that.
So back that up. Why
So
were you a tomboy? Yeah.
Well, it just so happens the only other girl in the neighborhood that I hung around with was a definite tomboy, and she tested climbing trees, so in order to keep her as a friend, I had to climb trees. And at that time, James Dean's movie was out, Rebel Without a Cause. That's an oldie goldie. That dates me. And so after that, there was all the racing, the race cars and so forth, and so we decided that we would have our gang names. She would be one and I would be another. And we would also race on our bicycles. And the unfortunate thing is we were playing chicken. And so she was at one end of the golf course and I was at the other end, and we headed towards each other. And the one thing we forgot to decide was when we chickened out which side we would go. We both chickened out the same way. So we didn't play that anymore. So that was kind of my days. Jeanette is laughing. She's saying she didn't know that.
Okay, stop right there. Stop right there.
Time on that one.
I had a camera battery die, but we got it all just in time.
Oh, thank goodness.
So,
I was worried you wouldn't have that one.
Sister Jane had a gang name.
I did. I was Johnny. And I think she was Rex. Or
Johnny and you two were tough.
oh, we were. Only with ourselves. It was our imaginary lives.
Where was this? Where did this take place?
In Miami. I grew up in Miami, in Coral Gables area. And we were best friends, for a while we were in school. I don't know what else you want me to tell you about about what kind of a child I was.
So,
Um,
how were you in school? Were you
I was-
distracted?
No. By one thing or another? Not really. I didn't get distracted easy. I was an average student. I did have to work hard. I remember in 6th grade one afternoon so distinctly after school waiting for someone to pick me up, and I was on the bleachers doing my homework, and I thought, will I ever get out of school, or will I die before I ever graduate? Well, the wonderful part of that is I'm still here. I made it through school. But that was it was a big concern for me at the time. I wasn't boy crazy, or I didn't have a lot of outside interests. When I'm going to go back to where I was born, because that kind of takes me more into my childhood
Sure.
than your question.
Okay.
Born in New York, Long Island area, and have one brother who is older than me. When I was about 4, we moved from New York to California. My brother was heavily and severely asthmatic, and the doctor suggested a warmer climate. Well, we went to California, and that lasted maybe 6 months. It didn't help him at all. So we moved to Miami, and when I was enrolled in school, I was in public school for 3 years, and then in the 4th grade we moved. We had moved locations in Miami, but I was only a mile away from the Catholic school. We weren't a strong Catholic family. We went to Mass sometimes, most of the time, but religion wasn't a strong part of our family. And when I was enrolled in 4th grade, that was when I first met sisters. I had no interest in them, but there they were. And the sister that was my teacher, I was mesmerized by. She was very kind. She never raised her voice, and she took an interest in me, a new kid on the block, in a sense, the new kid in the Catholic school in 4th grade. At that time, I hadn't made my first communion. I hadn't received my confirmation, because that was the year for confirmation when I was younger, in 4th grade. And so I was given some catechism instruction during religion class. There was a little side room that I went into with one of the most popular and the prettiest girl in the class, and I just felt so special that I was being catechized, in a sense, by the most important girl in the classroom. So it was a beautiful year for me, and I remained in Catholic school for the rest of my through high school, and I became very interested in the sisters. That particular 4th grade teacher, I knew I wanted to be like her. Her kindness and her fairness, and that kind of sideline attention that I was receiving from her without it being any favoritism. But I wanted to be like her. And I thought, well, if I'm going to be like Sister, I guess I have to be a teacher then. Again, I didn't know much about religious life, and so I thought, well, maybe I can. I'm not real smart, but maybe I could be a sister. So, during those younger years, I would play school at home, and that was kind of my imaginary life when I was by myself, and I had my class, and I imitated my teacher. And of course, in imitating my teacher, I had to look like my teacher. So secretly, I, made myself what I thought look like a sister, like teacher. So
I can see that.
it worked.
The other sisters use diapers, so I think you're much
Oh my
better with
gosh.
your diapers. So
Oh,
you keep going with your story.
we had no. I was the youngest, thanks be to God, in one sense. Anyhow, I had sisters for most of the rest of my schooling. Again, I was drawn to them. I was drawn to their kindness and their sense of accepting and their joy. They just seemed to be happy people. And I wanted some of that. I wanted to be a part of that. So I would spend time after school with some of the sisters. I would help them out in the classrooms, and those were the kind of things I enjoyed doing. I didn't date a lot. I won't tell you about my mother's plan. When I got into high school, again, the call, the feeling of wanting to be more than I was, it never went away. In that 4th grade, when I made my first communion, another sister gave me a holy card that I still have. On the back of it, it said, "What can I do for God for all that He is? What can I give to the Lord for all that He's given to me?" And at the time, in 4th grade, it was okay. I thought, wow. As I got older and would look back and read it, what can I give to the Lord for all that He's given to me? And there were even times where I would think, well, what has God given to me? I don't have this. I don't have the horse that I always wanted. Whatever. And then the other side would come, but look what you do have, and those type of things would come to me. What are you selfish about? And it was like almost like a passion. The older I got, the more passionate that became for me. When I was in high school, junior, senior year, what can I give to God? Because then I was seriously thinking of entering. And because I had the Sisters of St. Joseph throughout, that was the congregation that I would eventually feel drawn to. They were the ones that I knew. My senior year, my grandmother died, and my brother, who was in the Army, asked if I would stay home for another year rather than entering right after high school. And so I did, with my parents, both my parents, until my brother would get out of the service. And during that year, one of our kind of neighbor friends who grew up with us, I had heard grapevine, I never heard it from him, that he was going to ask me to marry him. Well, I was out of high school, I was already serious about marriage. And again, I hadn't dated a lot. And so that was a big moment in my life, a time of decision of, well, you could have one man who loves you, and you could have children, and I had them all named. I was going to have 5, and I had them named, mostly boys. It just, it was a very gentle reality that could be mine. And then the other side, what can I give to God for all that He has given to me? And the only thing I could give Him would be my total self. And that was my answer. And I remembered that night when I was discerning both of those, I lay in bed and I cried because I thought, that's what I'm going to do. Whatever I can give. And so I entered the convent the next year. My brother was out of the service. And where do we go from there?
You got me crying. Right?
Oh. All right, I guess give you a little bit about...
Sister Jane, the other sisters haven't talked a lot about entering, the novitiate. I'm talking about the geography. Where did you enter?
Oh.
What was the building? What did it look like? Those types of things. How many
Oh.
were with you? That whole process.
Okay. When I entered the novitiate, it was in Jensen Beach, Florida. We no longer have that space. It was a beautiful, beautiful area right on I think it was the Indian River, right on it. And there were 23 women who entered in my group with me. One left the next day. And then when Vatican II ended, there was a lot of women leaving congregations. Today I have 3 of the same women that entered with me still in my group. So thanks be to God for that. And when I see hard times or difficult times in our lives, I just say, but we remained here. We remained faithful to what we felt we were called to. Not that those that left didn't. Maybe their call was to leave, but we're here, and God sees that. So I wound up teaching. By the way, we were put into the classrooms even before we received our degrees. It was trial by fire, and I taught as what we call a white veil novice, and that means the second year of our novitiate. So while I was in Jensen, 2 of the novices went out to teach. We were both very different. I was quiet and reserved. She was happy and bubbly and just a ball of fire. She had 4th grade, I had 1st. And neither of us knew about teaching, but there we were. We had books and we taught. And I can remember what she would comment about. She says, "Oh, Jane, when we would see each other's classrooms going to lunch, mine would be in back of me, and the lines were noisy and loud, and then we'd get into the lunchroom, and all of your children were like this." Well, that was an exaggeration. They were quiet. It was like they pick up your own personality anyway. So that was that. There was a story that I was thinking about that I was going to share with you as you're doing all of this, about when I was here teaching in St. Augustine. I was here for about 10 years, and Sister Rita Baum, was involved with the deaf and blind ministry, and she needed people to help with catechism over at the DMB school. And she asked me. So I didn't know anything. I knew nothing about how to teach the deaf. I didn't even know fingerspelling. Well, it didn't take long before Sister Rita taught myself and another gentleman how to do fingerspelling. Okay, so that wasn't too hard. We practiced on each other. I had the communion class, which was the younger children. Well, I had their attention for about a minute, maybe 2, out of a half hour, trying to spell to them. Well, at 2nd and 3rd grade, they don't know all the words I'm spelling, and there I was. But it was my first encounter with the deaf. And again, it was just some of the passion, I think, that sisters have when they go out on mission, whatever it is that draws them to it. And I wanted to help. I wanted to continue to work with her. So, I stayed with it for a while, and I told Sister that it was just really hard because they were ready to go before I was ready to start. And so she did give me some of the blind children to teach. That was a little easier. I figured they couldn't see me. They didn't know what I looked like, but they could hear me. So that was my very first experience with disabled children. About 10 years later, I was missioned in Gainesville, and it was a middle-class school. I was teaching 8th grade, and the principal came to me and said that there were 2 children that the mother wanted to enroll. They were both in 8th grade. One was deaf. Do I feel like I could take them? And all I had as a background was finger spelling. She said the mother said that he could read lips. His name was Brian. And Lisa. Lisa was the girl, but Brian was her deaf brother. And so I thought, he may not always understand what I'm saying, but I can teach him through my body language, through my interaction with him, through that type of interest. And then I would use the board more often. I would look directly at him more often. And every once in a while I would finger spell. I also, because I knew I was going to have him that second semester, I bought a book of sign language. And so I taught myself some very basic things. Thank you, I'm sorry, look, please look. And tried to incorporate him as much as possible into the classroom. When we had confirmation, we had a little performance, and the class performed the song You Needed Me, or I think it's You Needed Me by Amy Grant, and we signed it. That was, again, how I was teaching myself how to sign a little bit, as well as getting the class involved with Brian and to be able to interact with him, if in nothing else, the song. So that was 10 years after the first. About 10 years later, I was in Miami in an inner city school, and I noticed at Mass one day, 2 pews in front of me, there were 3 adults, and 2 of them were signing to each other. And I thought, isn't that interesting? It was a father and his adult son. And I would watch them for a couple weeks, and I thought, oh, I wish I knew sign language. And the message came back, you do. I said, no, I'm not educated in signing. You know enough. You can learn. And so one day I went up to the father and I mentioned to him, I noticed you're signing. He mentions that, yes, his son Jose is deaf. And it just came out of me, would you like me to do some signing during Mass? I don't know how to do a lot, but I can give him something. And of course, yes, with that. So I got a religious signing book, and I learned, Lord have mercy and that type of thing that we have in Mass in our liturgy. And I could at least learn the basic parts of the liturgy. And on Sundays, I would never stand up. Father offered, if you want to stand up in the front, I said, no, thank you. Again, I haven't had any formal courses. So I would get a chair, and he would sit in the front pew, and I would sign whatever I could to him. And then eventually, I would make my own homilies during the homily, because I couldn't keep up with the priest with the homilies. And by the second year, I was trying to do to sign a little bit of what the priest was saying to him. He made his confirmation, which I was so happy about, for him. And it was a little, not a lot, but it was something that I felt that I can do. I can give to that. I don't have the education for it, but I can do it if I want to. And I believe that is in so many hearts of people. If you really want something, if you really want it, you can do it. And so, I felt very satisfied with that I felt like I was really ministering. So that's that story. Let's see what else. So I'll tell you another part of my ministry that has been very rewarding for me, and that was my time in Miami. It was probably my hardest ministry, my most challenging, but it was where I could really stretch myself, be stretched. What can I give to God for all that He's given to me? My Gainesville years were some of my happiest, but my Miami years were the most grace-filled, I think, for me. Transformative, I should say. I had no idea what Haitian people even look like when I was missioned to Miami. And I found out very quickly a little bit about their culture that first year. It was a rough school, very rough. There were fights probably every afternoon. They would collect their information during the day and be over on the other side of the church after school. And I thought, this is going to stop. Well, it took me about 3 years before I could really get the school where I felt it was leveled out. I'm kind of getting off track with the story I want to tell you, but a couple stories really. But I'll tell you the one about the Haitians. I don't know if you got any of this from Sister Kathy about the Haitians coming in after the earthquake. Several of our schools received children after the earthquake in Haiti, and without question. And that was such a wonderful experience to be able to do that. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about culture, it wasn't about documentation. It was about love, and we took them. And I remember this one child, that fourth grade child, that came in with her auntie. She knew very little English, and I noticed as she's sitting across from me, her jaw is all swollen, and I thought, gosh, is that a growth defect, or what's happening there? And I asked the mother, and she said she was she was in the house or had just left the house when her mother was still in there, when the house collapsed, and she experienced some of it. So we got her to Miami Children's Hospital the next day, who took her without question. And she still had shrapnel in her jaw. And they operated, and she was fine afterwards. She has a big scar, but she continued through St. Mary's. I had left St. Mary's a couple years prior to her graduation. I think she might have graduated last year. But that was a very significant part of my time there with Jennifer, her name was. I remember about a week after she came to us, I was walking her around the school, and it was a very old school, founded in 1939, and so, it had its own creaks and cracks. And she saw one of the cracks, and she ran her finger down it, and she said, "This from the earthquake?" And I reminded her that, no, we don't have earthquakes in Miami, and that she would be very safe here. So that's one story I remember. Oh, there's lots of stories I could tell you about St. Mary's. Let's see. Oftentimes, I've heard people comment that the sisters are a family. And in reality, that's not correct. We're not a family. We're a canonical institution belonging to the church, to the Catholic Church. So, as an institution belonging to the church, which is a hierarchical structure, I don't like the word under, but we are under church law and to promote the gospel. That's the basic function of religious. So the Institute itself also is not a democracy. These are not words that people like to hear. It is more of a hierarchical structure. It has a general superior who has counselors that she is responsible to dialogue with on important matters that involve the congregation. And I think one of the most intentional things that I find myself reminding myself of in this position is that it isn't about my personal likes or dislikes, desires, or whatever. It's what is the best thing for the congregation, or for this particular sister who is a part of the congregation, for the good of the whole. So, and that sometimes can be difficult when you have someone maybe that you especially like, or especially don't have a drawing to, and to be able to make calls, make decisions for them based solely on the need of that person and the congregation. It's a challenging. It's challenging for a general superior in particular, and many times they're not agreed with because the sisters, the members, don't understand where she might be coming from and have to trust. And that's hard when you don't know what the whole picture is in the mind of your leadership, but to trust them. So that's about it. They don't put that picture in.
It's for information only.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting life.
Job.
Yeah.
Tough job.
What can I give to the Lord for all that He's given to me? That's it. That's what drives me in everything. And I just, I feel passionate about what I do, and how far can I go? How far? Sometimes I hear this little voice saying, you want to push yourself to sainthood. And then I hear another voice saying, well, aren't you a proud little thing? A proud little saint you are. So, it's like, to even think of it is that in itself saying, but we're all called to that. You're called to that. He says, yes, remember that, Rich. We are. We're all called to sainthood, to sanctity, to holiness. When I wrote that piece to you, I don't know. I don't really see for any congregation what it looks like. I think that's God's plan. What I would want, and what I want is it rolling? Okay.
I'm Just double checking.
What I would want is to see our congregation continue into the future. Probably a very small group of women, but a group of women that can carry on the ministry of the church, the ministry of our congregation, and all that has come before us, to be able to continue that uniqueness in our world, and especially in Florida where we minister. Why should we have to dissolve? We have been here for so long. Will other congregations pop up? Of course they are. They're all popping up all over the place. But why should this congregation dissolve? It shouldn't. And, I think a lot of that depends on, again, yes, first God's will, but each of our passions. How passionate are we still at an older, mature age to be able to show other women that it's a very self-giving lifestyle that can be very full of joy, challenges, no doubt, but it answers the question of what can I give to God for all that He's given to me. So that's kind of, and I'll tell you my...
Stop for just a second. Your cross has shifted.
Oops!
There we go. Yeah, it was looking like a pectoral cross.
It says, I'm getting out of here. A pectoral cross. You know what that is? That's the one that the bishop wears. He just shows his chain. And you say, wonder what that's attached to. This big old cross. My feeling about the veil, or any kind of an identifiable sign, and my ring is an identifiable sign. My cross is the color, the style that I dress in. People can imagine I'm probably a sister. A veil is a very, very radical sign, symbol of a sister. I don't know that we like to think of it as being that radical. Just that one little piece of cloth, no matter what you've got on. Jeanette could put one on and they'd identify her as a sister because of it. And so it does have its controversy with congregations or individuals, not full congregations. Individuals is a much fairer way of saying it. Of wanting to wear it, not wanting to wear it. When I took the veil off, and I was in the traditional habit, and moved through the modifications where it was very modified, and we just wore a veil like you see it today. Not now on me. But a lot of my own congregation was no longer wearing a veil. And I remember what we were hearing was the laity would put us on a pedestal. And that was probably very true, and maybe still do. At the time, in my 30s, and I think I might have been in my 40s when I took it off again, but it was during a retreat for me, and I prayed. While I love, there's something about wearing it. It makes me feel good, and I would think that maybe that's not right. I shouldn't be feeling good. I should be just who I am. And I don't want to be on a pedestal. If people can relate better to me without a veil, then I'll take it off. And so I did. That was my discernment during the retreat. And it's been just recently, in the last 2 years, I think 2 or 3, that I've started wearing it outside. And it took a good year of discerning and praying over, will I put a veil back on? Why? Why not? And my decision to do that was based solely on what I felt was the people's need and desire, wanting to see a sister looking undoubtedly, unconditionally as a sister, not asking, am I a sister? And I want them to recognize that there's a sister in the house, a sister in the church, not, oh, there's Jane, but there's sister. So it's not really about my own identity. It's only the identity as a religious woman. That's what I want them to see. Because I think it's a sign, for me, it's a sign that gives the laity hope. It gives them comfort. Most people. There's others that, it would be really bad for, but I think it gives the laity a good feeling, whatever that good means. Just like I felt good at times when I wear it. And now I do. I still do. There's something that I like about wearing it. And I think it is because I'm undoubtedly recognized as a religious. Although my congregation doesn't, in general, wear a veil. But, thanks be to God, we have that option. We never said what we had to wear. And so, through the years, even with the change in Vatican II, in the changing of our clothing, there were women, sisters, who continued to wear a veil. And in my own discernment, and even as a general superior, maybe it was even more important for me, I felt, to wear it. So when I'm out in any public functions or liturgical functions, I'll put the veil on. Or if I'm going to something where it's specifically, I want to be seen as a sister, then I'll put it on. They don't know who I am otherwise. So, people like Jane, but that's not what it's all about.
One time you and I had a conversation in which you talked about, and I don't remember the words, maybe you'll remember them, something like, as a response, and this is going to sound a little disjointed, but maybe you'll remember the conversation, where, a woman, where Peter Madai said, a woman is called to do whatever a woman is capable, and that the charism of the sisters is to respond to what the dear neighbor needs.
To the needs of the dear neighbor.
But then you took that thought, and then you said, and my wearing the veil responds to the needs of my dear neighbor. I mean, I remember so clear, that just sticks with me. If you could say it that way, that kind of connects the whole, do you see what I'm saying? That kind of connects the whole charism.
Or she
Well, I
making it
kind
up?
of, no, I did say that.
You did say it.
But in a different
way.
wording
In a different word.
for the
Use
laity.
your words. Use
Right.
your words.
I already did.
Okay.
You weren't listening. Thank you, Rich.
All right.
She did, she just,
Said it long.
Said it.
That's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's eggshells.
It really is very, very much to the point of it's interesting. I watch sisters. I'm very, very conscious when I do put it on with around my sisters. If they don't wear a veil normally, because I know that they must be uncomfortable, and I feel uncomfortable. Because it's like we both do. We know that I'm doing something I feel like I have to do. They're not doing that. And whether it's because they feel like they can't, why they can't, I don't know.
That's interesting. I never imagined that would be
An issue,
Such
yeah.
a lightning rod?
Yeah. I've often wondered even if the priests even realize that it is such an emotional and very heated topic.
But do you
High
remember,
powered.
Sister, the priests did the same thing. They stopped wearing their blacks after Vatican II. Do you remember that? I mean, I remember that distinctly. They stopped wearing their blacks because they
Some of
tried
them
to
did.
meld in,
Yes.
But I think somebody saw that wasn't working, so they started putting their blacks back on. And sometimes they don't, of course. I've
Yeah.
never seen Bishop Estevez without his blacks, ever.
Our diocese is a little bit more conservative
Mm-hmm.
than other dioceses.
Yeah.
In other parts. I think the South is more conservative, if you want to if that's the word,
Right.
whatever that means.
Right.
More recognizable church people in the South.
Do you think there's I don't know. I'm trying to, and because I'm an outsider, I'm trying to understand it. Do you think there's a psychology to it that the veil for some people is very comforting visually, but then psychological for the sister who has to wear it and chooses not to? That's a different. I don't know. They don't need it, but me, if I find comfort in that image, that traditional image, that's what I want. And that I may be uncomfortable with you not wearing a veil, if I grew up around sisters, at a certain period of time. I just wonder, I just think people usually, it becomes a comfort level for them.
I think it is. You mean for the laity?
For the laity. And
I think
then
it
on
is.
the reverse, what is that comfort or non-comfort for the sister who's chosen not to wear it, or to wear, whatever that is? I don't know.
Yeah.
At first, I thought it was like just being practical. You're in Florida. It's hot, but it's more than that. I mean, it's not that, but.
Yeah, it is more than that. The traditional habit that's when Vatican II said, modify your habits to be practical. And because at the time, just looking at that, what that doll is wearing, all of those headpieces, that was the first thing to be modified. There was a whole piece that went all around the neck. And then there was another, there's two veils that they wear, that we wore. One, the lighter one is like a mesh almost, but an underveil. And then the habit was serge, all serge, long sleeves. And then we wore sleeves under that. We had what we call our undersleeves. And then, a long slip. I mean, it was
How long did it take you to get dressed?
Oh, we did it to the bell. We had 15 minutes in the morning. The bell rang, and within, I don't know if it was 20 or 30 minutes, we had to be downstairs in the chapel. So when that bell rang, you didn't take another snooze in the novitiate. We were in a dorm. We would jump out of bed. We had curtains around each of the beds, so we'd have privacy. That curtain swung, and you started getting all the pieces together.
Yeah.
It was fast. No mirrors.
So,
I don't
and
remember.
let me ask a question. Does that, regimentation, which is the only word I can think of, maybe that's the thing that the sisters are resistant to, that, oh my gosh, if we take a step toward this, then we might go back to bells and people telling us what to do? Do you think that?
I don't
maybe-
think so.
You don't think
No.
that there's
I don't think so. I think it has maybe has something to do even with our own psychology as women. There was that time where we always wore the same thing. And then we were freed from that, freed from it. We had options to wear what we wanted. And in our modification, it was, first modification became white. We were still in a habit, modified habit, but it became white. And then it became gray. And then a brown. And then not a habit skirt, and a jacket. And it just kind of evolved that way. And then eventually, especially the other congregations that were already moving quicker than we were, we became more conscious of them, and so pants became comfortable. And now we've got slacks on, and we can basically wear whatever we want. And that was one of the reminders I kept giving myself, that you can wear whatever you want. And because my sisters are very uncomfortable with it, I'm not going to push that on them. When I'm with the sisters in the house, as soon as I step foot in the door, I'll take it off. But when I go out to Mass or when I go out to a function, it'll be on. And, and I've had some criticisms to me.
Have you had some
Better.
affirmations as well?
From those that wear veils. From the others that wear it.
I just
But,
wanted to
it's
give
that
time check. It's 2:13
Oh.
right now,
Yeah, okay.
and Sister Esther will be here at 2:30. So
Okay,
I just
yeah.
wanted
You want to
Okay.
take a break?
Oh, not necessarily.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Okay, what do we want to cover that we haven't?
That's
She talked
probably
her
about it.
organization. She talked about her call, she talked about her stories, she talked a little bit about the government and the governance, and she talked about the veil.
Whoa.
She talked about the future. I mean, those were
Did I?
kind of the high points.
Did I talk about the future?
Where's-
Oh, yes, I did,
You
didn't I?
Yes, you did. Yes, you
You did.
Did I talk about my dementia?
Sister.
You're fun.
Last night, we were having dinner last night, and our dining room echoes like a boomerang. And Sister Carol Stovall, who is not a quiet person,
Right.
is talking at her table, but everyone in the dining room is hearing it. And she says, "You should have heard what I just found out about cocoa. Cocoa, do you know what it is helps to cure?" And, they're asking her, "No, what?" She says, "Well, what is that?" It was dementia. The dining room roared on that one.
Oh, that's great.
So, anyway,
That's funny.
The good news is, that you're finished for now. The
okay,
better
for
news
now.
is